The door of the small cafe swung open, and an elderly man stepped inside, his slow footsteps echoing against the wooden floor. He leaned on a dark wooden cane, scanning the room before settling into a seat by the window. His blue eyes, marked by time, carried a mix of weariness and distant memories. Emma, the young waitress with a warm smile, noticed his arrival immediately. He was a regular, but something about him seemed different that morning. She grabbed her notepad and made her way to the table, keeping her welcoming expression. "Good morning, sir?" "The usual?" The man lifted his gaze slowly, as if returning from faraway thoughts, and gave a faint smile. "Yes, black coffee. No sugar." His voice was deep, weathered by time. Emma nodded, and just as she was about to leave, she glanced at the menu in her hands. An idea popped into her mind. The cafe was offering a special dessert that day, a homemade chocolate cake, soft and fresh out of the oven. She hesitated for a moment, then made a decision. "Today, dessert's on me, sir. I think you'll like it." The old man raised an eyebrow, surprised. "And why's that?" he asked, almost suspicious. Emma shrugged, still smiling. "Because everyone deserves a little sweetness now and then." What she didn't know was that this simple act of kindness would change her life forever. If this story has already drawn you in, tell me in the comments. When was the last time a small gesture made a difference in your life? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It really helps. The cafe was quiet that morning, with just a few customers scattered around the tables. Emma returned to the counter, carefully placing a steaming cup of coffee on a saucer. Beside it, a small plate held a generous slice of chocolate cake, its surface slightly glossy from the touch of melted sugar. With light steps, she walked back to the table and set everything down in front of the man. He stared at the dessert for a few seconds before looking up at her. "You're sure you're not going to charge me for this?" She smiled. "Absolutely. Consider it a gift." The man held the cup for a moment, feeling the warmth spread through his fingers. Then, he picked up the spoon and cut a small piece of the cake, bringing it to his mouth slowly. Emma noticed how his expression changed ever so slightly, something between surprise and nostalgia. "Reminds me of my childhood," he murmured, almost to himself. Emma pulled out a chair and sat across from him, resting her arms on the table. "Really? So you used to have chocolate cake as a kid?" He let out a low chuckle, rough and restrained. "Not always, but in the few happy moments of my childhood, yes. My mother made something similar. The smell, the taste, takes me right back to those days." The waitress adjusted herself in her seat, intrigued. "Where did you grow up?" The old man looked at her for a moment, as if debating whether he should answer. Then he sighed. "In a small town in rural Texas, but that was a long time ago. A really long time. After I grew up, I enlisted in the army, served for many years." Emma raised her eyebrows, surprised. "You're a veteran?" He nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. "Of 2 wars." Emma sensed the weight in his words. There was exhaustion, but also something else, a silence filled with memories that seemed hard to put into words. "That must have been tough," she said softly. The man let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "Tough doesn't even begin to cover it, but it taught me a lot. The problem is, when the war's over, so many things change. When I came back, it felt like the world had moved on without me. I lost friends, I lost family, and in the end, all that was left was silence." Emma remained silent for a moment. She knew that many veterans struggled when they returned home, but hearing it from someone sitting right in front of her made it all feel much more real. "But you're not alone, right? Do you have family nearby?" The man glanced out the window. "Not everyone stays. But that's okay. That's life." Emma felt a tightness in her chest. There was a deep loneliness in those words. "Well, you're not alone today," she said, offering him a sincere smile. He looked at her for a moment and then gave a small nod, as if that simple phrase carried more meaning than she could ever imagine. Emma stood up. "I'll let you enjoy your coffee, but if you need anything, just call me." The veteran watched as she walked away to serve another customer. There was something different on his face now. A subtle light, as if, for a brief moment, the weight of the years had eased just a little. What Emma didn't know was that this encounter was only just beginning, and that the veteran had something for her, something that would change her life in ways she could never predict. The cafe grew busier as time passed, and Emma went back to her usual routine, serving orders and exchanging friendly words with customers. But every now and then, her eyes drifted back to the veteran's table. He remained there, slowly savoring his coffee and cake, as if each bite and sip brought back old memories. When he was done, the man adjusted his coat, grabbed his cane, and stood up carefully. Emma stepped over to clear his dishes, but he stopped beside her, holding a small folded bill between his fingers. "Thank you, miss." "Emma, right?" She smiled. "Yes, that's me, and I should be the one thanking you." He held out the money to her, but Emma shook her head. "No need, sir. It was a gift." He insisted, gently pressing the bill into her hand. "I know, but I want to." Not wanting to seem rude, Emma accepted it, nodding in gratitude. The veteran gave a faint smile, but before stepping away, he hesitated for a moment. "You remind me of someone I met a long time ago," he said, almost in a whisper. Emma furrowed her brows, intrigued. "Someone special?" The old man let out a soft, nostalgic chuckle. "Yes, very special." Before she could ask more, he turned and slowly walked out of the cafe. Emma sighed and looked down at the folded bill in her hand. It was a $20 note, nothing unusual. But as she unfolded it completely, she noticed something different. A small piece of paper was tucked inside. Curious, she opened the note and read the words, written in careful, old-fashioned handwriting. "Good people deserve good things. Don't forget that. A. Miller." A chill ran down Emma's spine. Something about that message felt heavy with meaning. She looked outside, hoping to catch another glimpse of the man, but he had already disappeared down the street. Holding the note between her fingers, she stood there for a moment, feeling as if that simple piece of paper carried something far greater than she could understand. And in that moment, without realizing it, her life began to change. In the days that followed, Emma couldn't get the veteran out of her mind. That simple note, with its mysterious words, echoed in her thoughts. Who was he really? What did he mean by that? The paper remained folded inside her apron, a little secret kept close to her heart. Whenever she had a free moment, she would take it out and read the words again, searching for a deeper meaning. Then, a week later, he came back. It was late afternoon when the cafe door swung open, and Emma recognized him instantly. The same worn-out coat, the same cane, the same tired eyes. But this time, there was something in them she couldn't quite define. Before he even had a chance to choose a table, Emma walked over to him, greeting him with a warm smile. "Mr. Miller, I thought you weren't coming back." The veteran raised an eyebrow, surprised. "So, you remembered my name?" "Of course," Emma replied, crossing her arms. "You left me a pretty mysterious note, you know." He gave a faint smile and walked to the same table as before. Emma followed. "Would you believe me if I told you that note was a test?" She frowned. "A test?" The old man sighed, looking down at his hands resting on the table. "In my life, I've met a lot of people. I've seen the worst and the best humanity has to offer. But every now and then, you come across someone different. Someone who still believes in kindness without expecting anything in return." Emma stayed quiet, sensing the weight of his words. I just wanted to do something kind," she said with a small shrug. "And you did," the veteran replied. "And that's why I wanted to talk to you." Emma sat down, intrigued. "About what?" He took a deep breath before continuing. "I don't have many friends. My family? Well, let's just say they're not around much. I spent most of my life serving this country, and when I came back, it felt like everything had changed. But instead of trying to fit in, I pulled away." Emma felt a pang in her chest. That must have been lonely. The old man gave a small, lopsided smile. "It was, but it's funny. After all this time, some people show up to remind you that there's still kindness in the world." Emma lowered her gaze, not sure what to say. "I wanted to invite you to have a coffee with me," he went on. "But not here. I want to show you a place." Her eyes widened. "A place?" He nodded. "A place that's special to me. I know it's a strange request, but I think you might like it." Emma hesitated. He was still a stranger to her, but somehow she didn't feel afraid. There was something in his voice, in his presence, a sense of trust she couldn't quite explain. "And where are we going?" The veteran smiled, as if he already knew she'd agree. "You'll see." Emma took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long while, decided to do something different. "All right," she said, grabbing her coat. "But just so you know, if this is a trap, I can scream really loud." The old man chuckled. "Fair enough." And just like that, without knowing exactly what she was getting into, Emma followed the veteran toward an encounter that would change her life forever. Emma walked alongside the veteran through the city streets, still a bit puzzled by the unexpected invitation. The cafe was closing, so her shift was over. The night air was getting colder, but something about that walk warmed her heart, a mix of curiosity and a strange sense of familiarity beside the old soldier. "So, where exactly are we going?" Emma asked, trying to hide her anxiety. The old man gave a small, knowing smile. "To a place that means a lot to me. You'll understand when we get there." After a few blocks, he stopped in front of an old brick building with a large wooden sign at the entrance. The sign read, "Hope Veterans Home." Emma frowned. "Is this a nursing home?" The veteran shook his head. "Not exactly. This is a shelter for veterans with no family or nowhere else to go. A lot of them gave everything for this country and in the end were forgotten." Emma felt a lump in her throat. She looked around, noticing the warm glow from the windows. Inside, she could see glimpses of life. Some men playing cards, others watching TV, and an elderly man dozing in an armchair by the fireplace. The old man turned to her. "I've lived here for a few years, but I don't want this to just be a place where we wait for time to pass. I want to make a difference." She blinked, surprised. "And where do I come in?" He smiled faintly. "You cared. You treated me like a person, not just some old man. And this place needs more people like you." Emma was speechless. I don't know what to say." The veteran placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to say anything right now, but I want to show you something." He opened the door and motioned for her to step inside. Emma hesitated for a moment, then followed him. The air inside was warm and welcoming, and the residents quickly took notice of the newcomer. Some smiled, others simply watched in silence. "Everyone, this is Emma," the veteran announced. "The young lady who gave me a free dessert and thought nothing extraordinary would come of it." A low chuckle rippled through the room. Emma flushed, unsure whether to laugh along or feel embarrassed. "Come on," the veteran said, leading her down a narrow hallway to a door at the end. He pushed it open, revealing a small office. The room was filled with bookshelves, old framed photographs, and a dark wooden desk. At the center of the desk sat an envelope. The veteran picked it up and handed it to Emma. "Open it." With hesitant fingers, she unfolded the paper and read the contents. Her eyes widened. "Funds designated for Emma Carter, so she can continue spreading kindness." Below the note was a sum of money so large it took her breath away. Emma looked up at the veteran, stunned. What is this?" He smiled, his eyes shining. "It's a gift, an investment. I want you to use this to help people. And maybe, just maybe, to change your own life too." Emma's heart pounded. She had never imagined that a simple act of kindness would lead to something like this. She clutched the envelope as if it were something fragile, unable to process what was happening. The number printed on the paper seemed unreal. Never in her life had she imagined having access to so much money, especially from someone who, not long ago, had been just another customer at the cafe. She looked at the veteran, her voice shaky with emotion and disbelief. "Mr. Miller, I can't accept this." The old man crossed his arms, his expression calm but firm. "Yes, you can, and you should." Emma shook her head. "But why?" "I didn't do anything to deserve this." The veteran tilted his head slightly, studying her with a deep, knowing gaze. "That's where you're wrong. You did something that very few people do these days. You saw me." She looked away, feeling a lump form in her throat. "But it's so much money. I wouldn't even know where to start." The veteran smiled. "That's exactly why I want you to have it. I know you wouldn't use it just for yourself. You have a good heart, Emma, and I want this money to be in the hands of someone who truly deserves it." She clutched the envelope tighter, feeling the weight of the decision pressing against her. But what if I waste this opportunity? What if I mess it up? The veteran chuckled softly. I've been in this world long enough to know that the best opportunities always come with fear. But fear shouldn't be what guides your choices. What you feel here should. He tapped his chest, right over his heart. So the real question isn't, what if I fail? But rather, what can I do with this? Emma took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. A part of her wanted to run away and pretend none of this was happening. But another part, a part that was growing stronger inside her, told her this was the chance she had been waiting for all along. She glanced around the office. The photographs on the shelves showed the faces of other veterans, some smiling, some serious. Men and women who had given everything for a country that, too often, had left them behind. Emma swallowed hard. You told me this place needs more people like me. The veteran nodded. And it does. She took another deep breath and finally met his eyes. Then, I accept. But on one condition. The veteran raised an eyebrow, intrigued. And what's that? Emma gave a small smile. I want to help this place. I want this money to be used for something bigger. The old man let out a genuine laugh, tapping the desk lightly. That's exactly the answer I was hoping for. A chill ran down Emma's spine. Somehow, she knew her life would never be the same again. And maybe that was exactly what she needed. In the days that followed, Emma felt like she was living in a parallel reality. The envelope full of money felt heavier than anything she had ever held before. Every time she opened it and saw the numbers staring back at her, a shiver ran down her spine. This could change her life forever. But how? She spent sleepless nights scribbling ideas, thinking about the best way to use this opportunity. The money was more than enough to escape her cramped apartment, pay off overdue bills, and even chase dreams that once felt impossible. But above all, Emma wanted to do something meaningful, something that would matter to others. And that's when the idea struck. The next morning, she returned to the veterans' shelter and found Mr. Miller. He was sitting in his usual armchair, gazing out the window, watching the world go by. Do you have a minute? Emma asked, holding a notebook filled with notes. The veteran smiled. For you? I've got all the time in the world. Emma sat down beside him and placed the notebook on the table. I spent the whole night thinking. I know this money could help me in a lot of ways, but I think I can do something bigger. Miller crossed his arms, intrigued. I'm listening. She took a deep breath. This shelter is a home for many veterans who have nowhere else to go, right? But what if it could be more than that? What if we could offer something beyond just a roof and a bed? The old man furrowed his brow. Go on. Emma flipped through the pages of her notebook, showing sketches and notes. I want to turn this place into a real support center for veterans. A place where they don't just live, but restart. We could offer courses, therapy, job reintegration, and, most importantly, a space where they feel valued again. The silence that followed was heavy. The veteran looked at the notebook, then back at Emma. There was something in his gaze, a spark that hadn't been there before. Do you realize what you're proposing? Emma smiled nervously. I do, and that's why I need your help. Miller laughed, throwing his head back. You're bold, kid, or just really stubborn. The veteran studied her for a moment before nodding slowly. You know, I spent my whole life fighting for something bigger than myself. When the war ended, I thought my mission was over, but maybe I still have something left to do. Emma held back her excitement. So, are you in? Miller took a deep breath, then smiled and extended his hand. I'm in. Emma shook his hand, feeling the weight of the decision. She had no idea if she could actually make this work. She didn't know if she was ready for such a responsibility. But now that the decision was made, excitement coursed through her veins. And yet, she soon realized that turning a dream into reality wasn't as simple as it looked on paper. The next morning, she and Miller gathered in a small room inside the shelter. The veteran had brought along some old paperwork, documents about the place, and financial reports that made one thing alarmingly clear. The shelter was already struggling to stay afloat. The reality is, we barely have enough money to cover basic expenses. Miller explained, pointing to the numbers on the paper. Some veterans donate when they can, and we get help from a few organizations, but it's not enough for a project this big. Emma bit her lip, feeling the first major obstacle take shape in front of her. Then we need funding. We need more people to understand how important this place is. Miller crossed his arms. And how do you plan to do that? Emma flipped through her notebook and took a deep breath. Social media. The veteran raised an eyebrow. Social media? Yes, Emma said, her excitement growing. If we want to raise funds and get support, we need to tell stories. We need to show the world the impact this shelter has. Miller seemed to ponder that for a moment. So, you think people actually care about stories like ours? Emma smiled. More than you think. People want to help. They just don't always know how. If we show their faces, their stories, their struggles and victories, we can touch hearts. The veteran let out a sigh, a small smirk forming on his face. Well, I guess if anyone can make this work, it's you. Emma pulled her phone from her pocket and looked at Miller, determination shining in her eyes. Then let's start right now. She opened the camera and pointed it at him. Mr. Miller, if you had one message to share with the world about this place, what would it be? He remained silent for a moment, then looked straight into the camera and said, Many of us fought for our country, but when we came home, we were forgotten. We don't want charity. We just want a chance to start over. A shiver ran down Emma's spine. She knew this video was just the beginning of something much bigger, and she had no idea what was about to happen. Emma spent the entire night editing the video. She chose a soft, emotional soundtrack and added subtitles to make sure every word Miller spoke would hit home. Before posting, she took a deep breath. Well, let's see where this goes, she murmured, tapping the upload button. She shared the video across social media with a simple but powerful caption, How many invisible heroes live among us without us even knowing? The Hope Veterans Home is a shelter for those who gave everything for us, but were forgotten. If you believe these people deserve a second chance, help us spread this message. Share. Together, we can make a difference. She set her phone down, trying not to get her hopes up. She knew how social media worked. Some videos went viral, others got lost in the endless stream of content. But deep down, a part of her had hope. The next morning, everything changed. Her phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Notifications flooded her screen. Likes, comments, shares. The video already had thousands of views and was still climbing fast. Emma's eyes widened, her heart racing. Oh my God! Miller appeared in the hallway and noticed her stunned expression. Something wrong? Emma shook her head, still trying to process everything. The video. It's gone viral. The veteran frowned. Viral? She turned the phone screen toward him, showing the numbers skyrocketing in real time. People are watching. They're commenting. So many are saying they want to help. Miller blinked a few times as if trying to wrap his head around it. So, does that mean it worked? Not yet, Emma said, excitement growing. But this is the first step. Over the next few days, the video's impact only grew. Reporters started reaching out, asking for interviews. Influencers shared the story. Donations began pouring into the shelter. And then, the most unexpected thing happened. Emma received a call from an unknown number. Hello? A serious voice came through the line. Miss Carter, my name is Robert Sullivan. I'm the director of a foundation that works with war veterans. Your video reached us, and we'd like to talk about a possible partnership. Emma was in shock for a few seconds before she managed to respond. That would be incredible. Sullivan continued. What you did is rare. You didn't just tell a story. You made people feel something. We want to help you turn this project into something much bigger. Emma felt a lump in her throat. She looked over at Miller, who was watching her expectantly. That simple act of kindness, a dessert offered from the heart, was now changing lives in ways she never could have imagined. Emma walked through the shelter, looking at everything around her with new eyes. Just weeks ago, this place had been nothing more than a quiet refuge for forgotten veterans. Now, thanks to one small gesture and the power of a well-told story, it was becoming something much greater, a second chance for many who had lost hope. The partnership with Sullivan's Foundation had brought not only financial support, but also a network of volunteers, therapists, and professionals dedicated to helping veterans reintegrate into society. Courses were being offered, from job training to therapy sessions, to help them cope with the scars of war. The shelter was no longer just a temporary home. It had become a true fresh start for the men and women who had once served their country. That morning, Emma found Miller sitting on the porch, quietly watching the activity around the shelter with a subtle smile. "What is it?" she asked, sitting beside him. The veteran let out a deep sigh. "I was just thinking about how fast everything changed." Emma laughed. "You mean how a piece of cake changed the fate of this place?" Miller smiled. "Something like that." He turned to her, his expression growing more serious. "Emma, do you realize what you've done?" She hesitated. I just wanted to help." The veteran nodded. "And you did, but it's more than that. You reminded the world that there are still people who care. You gave a voice to those who had lost hope." Emma felt a lump in her throat. "I never thought that something so small could have such a big impact." Miller gave a knowing smirk. "That's how the best stories begin." He reached into his coat pocket and handed her something. It was a new note, written in the same careful handwriting. Emma unfolded it and read, "Good people deserve good things. Now go and do even more. A. Miller." She pressed the paper against her chest and smiled, a different kind of warmth filling her heart. The veteran gave her a light pat on the shoulder and stood up. "Now get to work, young lady. We've still got a lot to do." Emma laughed and stood up too, ready to keep going. She had started this story as just a waitress, serving coffee and desserts, but now she was part of something much bigger. And deep down, she knew this was only the first page of a story that had many more chapters left to be written.